American Comics. Infinite Evolution, cut off at the beginning White Queen. Chapter 1. Marvel 626 Universe. 2008, New York, Hell's Kitchen. As the center of evil in the Marvel Universe, Hell's Kitchen is almost the capital of evil. Although there are only 8 small streets, the evil here is probably not comparable to that of 8 Satans. Walking on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, even in broad daylight, there may still be a hooded walking up to you at any time, holding a cold object against your lower back, and saying, "Bro, I'm here for you. Point money." At this moment, at 11 o'clock in the night, in front of the Ace of Spades Club with its dark night and flashing neon lights, a sudden conflict broke the tranquility and luxury of the night. On both sides of the street, high-end cars and motorcycles were parked randomly, as if they were the setting for an upcoming drama. The Dutch gang and the Russian gang, 2 prominent forces in Hell's Kitchen, have recently come to blows over the white powder business. This is the 8th fight this month. Passers-by walking around seem to have become accustomed to it. There are even a few who are not afraid of death standing not far away with cameras filming, preparing to sell them to the underground black market to earn a fortune. Pen. A member of the Dutch gang with a gloomy face, his mouth tightened, finished the last puff of cigarette in his mouth, stamped the cigarette butt under his feet, and spat softly. This action seemed to be a vent for his inner anger and unwillingness, and also a harbinger of the coming storm. He stretched out his right hand and fumbled around his lower back for a while, and after a while, a delicate silver pistol appeared in his hand. He checked the firearm calmly, and every movement seemed so skillful and confident, as if this scene was no stranger to him. Bang! A crisp sound suddenly sounded in the night. The member of the Dutch gang who was checking the firearm stared angrily. He reached out and touched his chest, and the red blood had covered his clothes. Fake! I really got hit this time. Ah! A young lady who had just got off work from the Ace of Spades Club screamed in horror. As this ear-piercing scream pierced the night sky, both sides acted almost simultaneously. Bullets were like angry swarms, intertwining into a web of death in the air. The car glass on both sides of the road was instantly shattered by the intensive firepower, and the fragments scattered, intersecting with the flashing neon lights, forming a bizarre picture. Opposite the Ace of Spades Club, a bar called the Bad Man is sitting quietly in the darkness. It seems that everything happening around it has nothing to do with it. It is like an isolated island, maintaining an atmosphere in the center of the storm. An eerie tranquility. The windows of the bar were closed tightly, and the thick curtains blocked the chaotic sight of the outside world. Occasionally, a faint light came through, which was in sharp contrast to the noise and firelight outside. There was only one window with no curtains drawn. Behind the window lattice that was not covered by the heavy curtains, a young man with profound Asian features was sitting peacefully on a soft sofa. His eyes penetrated the night, and he quietly watched the sudden chaos and noise outside the window with an almost detached attitude. His face looked particularly calm in the dim light, as if the storm outside had nothing to do with him, but was just a picture worth savoring in his eyes. The young man's name is Su Ming. He comes from the cow and horse world of the 21st century and lives a repetitive life of 996 every day. One day, when he worked overtime until 1 o'clock in the morning, he was riding his 200 yuan bicycle to go home and rest. But fate quietly turned at that moment. A dump truck that ignored traffic rules and ran rampant, like the beast in Proxima Midnight, ruthlessly sent him to this world. At first, Su Ming, like most of the time travelers, was very excited, and he finally became the lucky one favored by God. But when he calmed down and accepted the memory of the original host, he realized that he had actually traveled to the Marvel world. Oh my gosh, this is so bad. New York in the Marvel world is like Gotham in the 600th world, it is simply a breeding ground for villains. The strength of criminals is getting stronger as they fight. At first, they only smuggled some arms and sold some white powder. But after the Kitori invaded, they began to pick up garbage and use alien technology. In the later stage, they were basically supplied directly by Hydra. The functions of the government have basically collapsed, and at most they provide a certain foundation. Super ability criminals rob bank vaults. Do banks still need to hire superheroes as security guards? Not to mention that the place where he is the center of sin in Sin City, Hell's Kitchen. Here, fights between gangs are commonplace, with a small fight every 3 days and a big battle every 5 days. The sound of gunshots and roars interweave into the unique melody of this land. However, behind this chaos and violence, there is a deeper shadow hidden, the underworld Emperor Jinpin. He is like an invisible giant hand, controlling the delicate balance between the major forces, allowing this chaotic land to maintain a distorted order to a certain extent. But even Jin Bing's methods have not yet reached the level of perfection. It seems that he lacks some depth and sophistication that can only be understood behind bars. This resulted in the hand easily invading New York's underground forces, making New York even more chaotic and dark. In this abyss of evil that is beset by dangers and undercurrents, the way to survive is often hidden in extraordinary power and unique strategies. Fortunately, Su Ming awakened his gold finger and the daily sign in system after traveling through time. In this system, as long as he signs in and clocks in every day, he can get random rewards from all realms. On the first day after traveling back in time, Su Ming obtained one of Wolverine's abilities, Healing Factor, by checking in. With this ability, he will undoubtedly lay a solid line of defense for his future survival. Su Ming, who possesses a healing factor, is as if he has been given a regenerative healing factor. Even if he suffered fatal injuries, such as bullets piercing the skull, sharp blades piercing the heart, and various fatal injuries, these injuries in his body were like spring breeze blowing through dead trees, quickly stimulating amazing vitality and resilience. His wounds will heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The pain and weakness will disappear in an instant, leaving only a more tenacious and unyielding will. Of course, Su Ming, who had traveled back in time for a year, didn't just sign up for this kind of ability. In the days that followed, he signed in one after another and received various weird rewards. Such as, infinitely refillable beer mug, magical little blue pill, Tasaka Rin's black stockings, USD modifier, top surgical ability, and so on. They are all rubbish rewards. There are only two rewards that are relatively unremarkable, namely, Super Serum with no side effects, and Adamantium Metal Skeleton. Super Serum is pure and powerful. It not only greatly enhances Su Ming's physique and strength, but more importantly, it completely abandons the possible side effects of traditional serum, allowing Su Ming to become stronger while maintaining physical and mental health and balance. The Adamantium Metal Skeleton is the perfect combination of technology and power. It integrated with Su Ming like a second layer of skin, not only making his bones indestructible, but also giving him extraordinary agility and strength. With the dual blessing of Super Serum and Adamantium Metal Skeleton, ordinary gangsters are nothing more than mantises in front of him. If they are not careful, they may cause humiliation or even die on the spot. His strength is far from what it used to be, and it is enough to make any opponent who despises him pay a heavy price. But there is a problem right now, that is, the fighting between the two gangs is disturbing his business. Although he has the ability to stop this fight, he doesn't want to meddle in other people's business. He just wants to lie down now. Sitting in the pub every day, looking at the long and beautiful young legs, or chatting with the blonde wife who lost her husband early in life about her future life. It's a pity that because of the fight between the two gangs, he had to end early today. Just when Su Ming was about to end his business for the night and close the door, a burst of light and attractive footsteps broke the imminent silence of the air. The door opened slightly, and a blonde girl walked quietly into this quiet space like an elf in the night. She has a graceful figure, exuding irresistible romantic charm with every step she takes, as if even the air is intoxicated by it. She walked straight to the bar, elegantly took out $2 brand new US dollars from her delicate wallet, and gently placed them on the smooth wooden table. Her voice was low and magnetic. "A glass of whiskey, thank you." Su Ming raised his eyebrows, came to the bar, picked up the crystal clear whiskey glass skillfully, tilted it gently, and the golden liquid slid down like silk, making a crisp sound when it collided with the ice. While pouring the wine, he paid attention to the blonde's eyes full of stories. He couldn't help but feel a little curious in his heart as to who the other party was, and he actually ignored the gangsters fighting outside. When pushing the wine glass in front of the blonde, Su Ming smiled and said, "Please use your whiskey slowly." The blonde girl smiled slightly, picked up the wine glass, took a sip, and then praised, "It tastes very good, thank you." The atmosphere between the two became more relaxed with the exchange of a glass of whiskey. The blonde put down the wine glass, curiosity flashing in her eyes. This is such a special place, especially tonight, it feels particularly peaceful. By the way, my name is Emma Grace Frost, what's yours? When Su Ming heard this, his heart moved slightly, but he didn't expect that the other party turned out to be the legendary White Queen. He smiled slightly and introduced himself. My name is Su Ming, and I am the owner of this bar. Nice to meet you, Miss Emma, I have heard your name for a long time. When Emma heard this, an unexpected light flashed in her eyes, and then a charming smile appeared on her lips. Oh. Really? Then I am really honored. However, now I am a little curious, Mr. Su Ming, are you still willing to continue this unexpected conversation, or would you like to welcome me as an uninvited guest? After Emma finished speaking, a faint bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth inadvertently. There was an unknown bitterness and helplessness hidden in this smile. As a mutant, she has experienced too much prejudice and injustice in this society, and every scar is deeply imprinted on her heart. People called her a monster, and even her father treated her coldly. She dropped out of school early, and now she can only pretend to be an ordinary person, doing arduous and menial work in the hotel day after day, in exchange for the meager salary that can only sustain her livelihood. However, even in such a predicament, Emma never gave up her yearning for her dream, which was to become a teacher and illuminate the future of more children with the light of knowledge. But unfortunately, her status as a mutant is like an insurmountable gap, making the road to realizing this dream full of thorns and bumps. Whenever it is quiet at night, Emma will always sit alone in front of the window, staring into the distance, her heart full of desire for dreams and helplessness towards reality. Emma Grace stared at Su Ming quietly, waiting for his answer. She seemed to have expected that she would be kicked out soon. The lighting in the bar is soft and warm, adding a touch of warmth to this moment of tranquility. Emma's mood is very complicated. She hopes that Su Ming can accept her true identity like others and give her the respect and understanding she deserves, but she is also afraid that this hope will fail and she will be ignored and hurt again. Time seemed to freeze at this moment, and there was a subtle sense of tension in the air. Emma held the wine glass tightly, her fingertips turned slightly white, showing the turmoil in her heart. Just when Su Ming was about to answer, the door of the tavern was suddenly pushed open again. There was a rush of heavy footsteps and a commotion. Members of the Russian gang poured in. They put their arms around each other and their faces were filled with excitement. The joy of victory and arrogance. It turns out that during this short period of silence, the situation in the outside world has quietly changed. The fierce fight between the Dutch gang and the Russian gang ended with the victory of the Russian gang. I've said it a long time ago, the Dutch are just a bunch of soft-footed shrimps. Their heads are probably full of cheese fantasies. Yes, they are immersed in the world of cheese all day long and are so soft that they have no fighting spirit. Ha 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 ha. A burst of unbridled and harsh laughter echoed in the tavern, which was the unscrupulous ridicule of the Russian gang members. Boss, bring the wine quickly, we want to celebrate this victory. A brown-haired Russian man shouted in a rough voice, his words revealing his pride in victory and contempt for the Dutch. Okay, everyone, wait a moment, the wine and food will be here soon. Su Ming responded and quickly served beer and whiskey to the bears. At this moment, a burly Russian man inadvertently caught a glimpse of Emma sitting quietly by the bar. His eyes were instantly attracted to Emma, and a sly smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Then he picked up the wine bottle in his hand and walked towards her in a swaggering manner. Hey, beauty, it's boring to drink alone. Come on, brother, how about having a drink with you? There was a bit of frivolity and provocation in his tone, and he obviously didn't take Emma's wishes seriously. When Emma heard this, her beautiful eyebrows frowned slightly, and a trace of displeasure and determination flashed in her eyes. She retorted coldly, I'm sorry, sir. I don't need your company, and I don't want you to disturb me in this way. Quote. When the big Russian man saw this, his expression suddenly changed, and he glared at Emma angrily, as if he wanted to eat her alive. You fool, I'm so shameless. The big Russian man said that he was going to grab Emma with his hands. However, at this critical moment, a young man stood between the two. Su Ming quickly stood up. He strode between the two of them and interrupted the Russian man's actions with a firm voice, that's enough. Everyone is here to drink and relax, why make it so unpleasant? Su Ming's eyes revealed unquestionable majesty. He tried hard to play the role of peacemaker, trying to calm down the conflict that was about to break out. However, the Russian man did not listen to the dissuasion at all, and his anger had reached its peak. Without saying a word, he whipped out his pistol and pressed the black muzzle directly against Su Ming's head. There was a sudden silence in the entire tavern. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the tragedy that might happen next. Who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in my business? The Russian man roared through gritted teeth, his eyes full of violence and madness. Facing the cold and biting gun barrel on his forehead, Su Ming's eyes instantly became extremely cold. He slightly twitched the corners of his mouth, outlining a faint yet extremely dangerous smile, which seemed to hide the tranquility before the storm. Oh, threaten me. Su Ming's voice was low and powerful, and every word was like a heavy hammer hitting people's hearts. Do you think that just a gun can make me retreat? When the big Russian man saw this, a cruel smile appeared on his lips, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. Boy, I advise you not to mind your own business. In this world, there are some people you can't afford to offend. Now, get out of my way, or don't blame me for being rude. He warned fiercely, his finger unconsciously increasing the pressure on the trigger. However, Su Ming seemed not to hear his threat and still maintained his calm and unhurried attitude. You're right. I advise you to put down your gun. In this world, there are some people you can't afford to offend. Su Ming said calmly. You're looking for death. The Russian man roared angrily, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. In an instant, a deafening bang resounded throughout the tavern, and the air seemed to be torn apart by the sudden gunfire. Quote. However, just when everyone thought that Su Ming would not escape disaster, an incredible scene happened. The moment the bullet flew out of the gun barrel, it seemed to encounter some kind of invisible barrier. There was only a crisp, clang sound. It did not penetrate Su Ming's head as expected, but only caused Su Ming's head to tremble slightly. One side, as if it was just a harmless touch to him. There was a sudden silence in the tavern. Everyone stared at this scene with wide eyes in disbelief. Su Ming looked at the big Russian man in front of him with cold eyes, and saw that he pinched the opponent's neck with one hand as accurately as an iron pincer, and lifted the fierce Russian man up without any effort. I think you're the one who wants to die. The gunshot wound on Su Ming's forehead slowly healed at an astonishing speed in front of everyone's eyes. This scene was beyond imagination, as if time had slowed down at this moment. What is even more jaw-dropping is that witnesses clearly witnessed that during his recovery process, a tough sheen-like aluminum alloy was faintly revealed under his skin. Woo! 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 The big Russian man, who was lifted up by Su Ming with one hand, was desperately slapping the opponent's strong arms, trying to break free from this irresistible force. His face was distorted due to extreme congestion, and his eyes were wide open, revealing extreme panic and pain, as if he was fighting a life-and-death struggle with the edge of suffocation at every moment. Tuck-tuck. The crisp sound of bullets being loaded suddenly sounded in the air, and the tension instantly reached its peak. In the tavern, upon seeing this, the other Russian gang members took out their guns without hesitation, and pointed their black muzzles at Su Ming. Hey friend, my name is Vladimir and I want to apologize on behalf of my brother. Besides, I think you don't want to cause too much damage to yourself, right? Vladimir lowered his voice, with a threatening tone that could not be ignored, and looked directly at Su Ming with burning eyes. Ha! You bunch of fools really can't stop eating shit, and you even want to threaten me. An indifferent smile appeared on Su Ming's lips, as if he didn't care about the threat in front of him. He gently grasped his right hand, and only heard a crisp click. The strong man's face instantly lost all color, his eyes widened, and he could no longer express a breath. He completely turned into a cold corpse, hanging feebly in Su Ming's hands. At that moment, the air in the tavern seemed to freeze, and it was so quiet that it was heart-stopping. Even the tiniest breathing could be heard clearly, as if time had stopped at this moment. People's eyes focused on Su Ming, with disbelief and shock. The members of the Russian gang looked at each other, their eyes filled with disbelief and anger. They could not imagine that this tavern owner would dare to take away their brother's life so brazenly on their territory and in front of them. Doesn't he know what it means to be an enemy of the Russian gang? And the White Queen, Emma Grace, this romantic beauty, also showed a rare look of surprise at this moment. She stared at Su Ming, her deep eyes flashing with complicated emotions. She never expected that this seemingly gentle man would have such a decisive and cold side. Oh, my friend, you really gave me a surprise, but you seem to have made a wrong choice. A sneer appeared at the corner of Vladimir's mouth, his tone full of sarcasm and provocation. Then, he suddenly waved his arm, a fierce look flashed in his eyes, and shouted low and powerful, "Kill him. Let him know the price of provoking the Russian gang." Following his order, all Russian gang members present pulled the triggers in their hands at the same time. They roared, and the guns in their hands poured out like a torrential rain. The bullets drew silver tracks in the air, heading straight for Su Ming. However, Su Ming did not stand still and wait for death. After being injected with the super serum, his movement speed now reached the limit of ordinary people. His figure seemed to have turned into a ghost, and his speed was so fast that it was beyond the reach of ordinary people. In the hail of bullets, he was like a fish swimming in water, moving flexibly, and every dodge was just right, so that all the fatal bullets missed, and even if a few of them occasionally hit him, it didn't hurt. Almost in the blink of an eye, Su Ming had already approached two members holding shotguns. After hearing two puff sounds, Su Ming had a heart-to-heart exchange with them. As the battle started, the White Queen, Emma Grace, was not idle either. She relied on her telepathy to successfully control several Russian gang members to kill each other. Seeing his men falling one after another like dominoes, Vladimir's face instantly became extremely gloomy, and there was an unprecedented solemnity and alertness in his eyes. He realized that he had made a serious mistake. He had underestimated the strength of the bar owner. I originally thought that the opponent was just an ordinary superpower or mutant. With the heavy firepower in their hands, they could easily subdue them. However, reality gave him a blow. The opponent's strength was far beyond his imagination. Various thoughts surged through Vladimir's heart, and his reason told him that continuing to fight head-on would only worsen the situation and sacrifice more brothers. So, he made a decisive decision and issued a low and powerful command in his throat: retreat. As the order was given, those members who were still barely standing immediately turned around and staggered away towards the exit of the Midnight Tavern. Their faces no longer had the previous arrogance, but were replaced by deep fear and panic, as if they had just woken up from a nightmare. There was an indescribable sense of depression in the air, and even the air seemed to have a hint of blood and despair. Vladimir was the last one to leave the tavern. He looked back at the man standing there, exuding a cold aura, with a trace of unwillingness and helplessness flashing in his eyes. The Russian gang will never swallow this bad breath easily, and our anger will continue to burn like a raging flame. Next time, when the bell of revenge rings, it will be Alexei Seisvich who comes to visit in person. After Vladimir said something viciously, he left the Midnight Tavern in the same embarrassment. Wow, next time, when the revenge bell rings, why don't you take the postgraduate entrance examination? Su Ming complained casually and watched the Russian gang leave in embarrassment. Then he slowly raised his right hand and his eyes fell on the bullet wounds on his arm that were rapidly healing. To him, these scars are proof that he already has a bit of strength to survive here. Even if his head is shot occasionally, he will not die on the spot. What's more, his strength will continue to improve, and it will be difficult to get shot in the head in the future. So, you are actually one of the mutants, right? Emma Grace whispered softly and approached Su Ming cautiously. Her eyes shone with hope, which was a deep desire for her kind and for belonging to the family. Su Ming tilted his head slightly, his eyes falling on Emma. After a moment of pondering, he slowly said, "To a certain extent, you can say that. With a system, his ability boundaries are theoretically infinitely broadened. As long as he maintains his consistent check-in habit, it is like opening a door to unlimited potential. In the future, no matter what kind of extraordinary ability it is, it will be gradually unlocked with each check-in and become his possession. He will also separate from the mortal body bit by bit, and eventually become the omniscient and omnipotent of the universe." Just when Su Ming and Emma were about to have an in-depth exchange of ideas, the door of the tavern was opened again. But this time it's not a Russian gang member who comes, but a vigilante who stays up late at night and jumps up and down in Hell's Kitchen all day long. At the door of the tavern, a man in a red uniform leaned heavily, his posture revealing weakness and exhaustion that was difficult to conceal. There was faint blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, and his whole person looked like he had been destroyed. Matt. Seeing the person coming, Su Ming's voice was filled with surprise and concern. He quickly stepped forward and firmly supported the staggering opponent. Cough. 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 After feeling Su Ming's breath, Matt Murdock's tense nerves instantly relaxed. Blood overflowed uncontrollably from the corners of his mouth and slowly dripped along his chin, reflecting his resolute but slightly pale face. Let me guess, your boy is going to fight those gangsters alone tonight, right? As Su Ming spoke, he quickly stepped forward and helped Matt steadily to the sofa in the tavern that had survived and was still intact. Ahem, I can't just sit idly by and watch this happen. They actually kidnapped a child tonight. I have to stand up. Matt's voice was weak but firm. He was sitting on the sofa, his face as pale as paper, but he still tried hard to maintain an unyielding pride. When Su Ming heard this, a complicated smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, which was not only recognition of Matt's brave behavior, but also mixed with a hint of helplessness and heartache. Tisk, 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 you are so brave and fearless, I have to admire you. There was a hint of ridicule in his words, but more of it was care and concern for his old friend. Come, let me check it carefully and see how many scars your body has added to justice tonight. As Su Ming spoke, he began to carefully examine Matt's body professionally. Every touch seemed to be a silent tribute to the pain and sacrifice he had endured. At the same time, the White Queen silently came to the two of them. Her beautiful eyes were full of unconcealable curiosity and exploration of Matt. However, this curiosity soon turned into shock. Her pupils suddenly widened and she exclaimed in disbelief, "Is he the vigilante that was advertised in the newspapers? That mysterious figure who silently guards in the darkness and is called the devil of Hell's Kitchen by the world?" There was a hint of disbelief in her voice, mixed with a bit of admiration and exclamation. If you're talking about the guy who caused the gangsters a lot of headaches and the reward amount keeps rising, then, yes, it's me. Matt turned his head slightly, with a wicked smile on his lips, and his words revealed an indescribable coolness. However, this cool feeling did not last long. There was only a crisp sound of pop, and Su Ming patted the injured part lightly without hesitation, which immediately made Matt grimace in pain, and the pain on his face, the coolness disappeared instantly. Okay, you're already injured like this, so stop pretending. Su Ming was quite speechless about Matt's self-pretentious behavior. Fortunately, he was used to it. Okay, let me count your battle losses tonight. Su Ming stood up and wiped the blood on his hands. His eyes showed some seriousness and helplessness. He gently touched his chin and continued. In terms of ribs, you can be said to have suffered a heavy loss. There are 3 ribs on the left and 2 on the right, which adds up to 5 ribs. It seems that your opponent tonight is quite difficult. Not only that, your legs were not spared either. Both your left and right calves were fractured. You may be like a jumping and walking hero when you walk. Your forearms are also fractured. Not to mention your skull, there are even bone fractures. It was obviously hit hard by some metal instrument. Let me ask you, did you have a close encounter with an out-of-control truck this time? Why is there no good place on your body? Having said that, Su Ming's eyes were full of admiration and appreciation for Matt's perseverance. 30. Matt held out 3 fingers and said softly. What do you mean, speaking in human language? When Su Ming heard this, he frowned slightly, obviously confused by Matt's answer. A proud smile appeared on Matt's lips, and he straightened his chest, with undoubted pride in his voice. Tonight, I dealt with 30 of their enemies alone. As soon as these words came out, the air seemed to freeze for a moment. Su Ming's eyes flashed with surprise. Good guy, you really tricked me this time. Su Ming shook his head helplessly, but there was a smile on his lips. Haha, I'm awesome, I saved that kid from 30 of them. When Matt heard this, he burst out laughing, his pride evident in his words. Do you know? I managed to rescue that innocent child from being surrounded by 30 of them. It felt like I had won an epic battle. However, Su Ming's expression gradually became serious, and he asked in a deep voice. But have you ever thought that all this might be a well-designed trap? Matt's smile froze on his face. He was stunned for a moment, then frowned. What do you mean? They may have deliberately taken the child away as bait to force you to take action. The gangsters are very skilled in using such methods. They know your weaknesses and your abilities, so they deliberately set up this trap to catch you all. Su Ming frowned and said slowly. When Matt heard this, the smile on his face gradually faded, replaced by deep thoughts. He was silent for a moment, but those eyes that were obviously blind seemed to penetrate the night and look directly at the belief deep in his heart. Perhaps, even if I knew in advance that it was a carefully laid trap, my choice would still not be shaken. Matt's voice was low and powerful, and every word seemed to burst out from the depths of his heart, full of unquestionable determination. He knows that as a vigilante, it is his mission to protect justice and innocence, and it is also his mission to fight gangs. On this road full of dangers and unknowns, he has already put his life and death aside, and is only willing to use his own flesh and blood to bring a glimmer of light to this dark city. Pop. Look, this is called professionalism. Su Ming couldn't help but applaud Matt. How about I formally award you with the Anti-Crime Hero of the Year trophy later? Let's give you a commendation meeting and tell you in detail how brave and fearless you have been in the past year, and how you have wiped out all the sins. Su Ming couldn't help but said angrily. Matt lowered his head and smiled when he heard this. Actually, it's not impossible. Hey, you kid, you kicked your nose in the face. Without saying anything, Su Ming hit Matt with an elbow on his injured ribs. Hiss. This is going to cost someone a life. Matt said with a pale face. Regarding Matt's performance, Su Ming just wanted to punch him twice more, but unfortunately the opponent was injured now, so he had to let him go first. But there's something wrong. Even if 30 people were ambushed, with your skill, you shouldn't have been so seriously injured, right? Have you encountered any difficulties this time? Su Ming asked curiously. We did encounter a tough opponent this time. There is a big guy hidden in that gang. He is extremely powerful and has amazing defensive capabilities. When I fought with him, I almost tried my best, but I still felt powerless. Speaking of this, Matt's voice couldn't help but have a hint of solemnity. I suspect that that guy may have some kind of extraordinary ability. He is a super ability person. It was him who caused me to suffer a lot in this battle and suffered a lot of injuries. His thoughts seemed to still be immersed in that fierce battle, and every detail was vividly in his mind, making him couldn't help but sigh again at the power of that mysterious opponent. Su Ming, on the other hand, listened quietly, his eyes flashing with thought, and he was obviously also shocked and curious about the battle described by Matt. What are the characteristics of the other party? Su Ming asked curiously. Well, every time the opponent attacks, he is used to hitting with his head. There is a sharp corner on his head. After Matt thought for a few seconds, he spoke. Sharp corner. Collision. After hearing Matt's introduction, Su Ming had the image of a villain in his mind. That's the Rhino Man. Matt, your target tonight won't be the Russian gangsters, right? There was a hint of unnoticeable nervousness in Su Ming's tone, and he looked at Matt with sharp eyes. Matt was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, what's the problem? Su Ming sighed softly, with a complicated look on his face. If that's the case, then what you encounter tonight is probably the top thug of the Russian gang, Rhino Man. He's considered one of the supervillains in New York. Having said this, Su Ming looked at Matt with a hint of shock. The Rhinoceros Man is amazingly powerful and his defense is ridiculously strong. To be able to retreat from him, your luck this time is really incredible. Matt couldn't help but smile bitterly when he heard this. He recalled the scene of the battle with the rhinoceros, feeling both fear and happiness in his heart. But I feel like that guy's brain is a little bit inflexible. Except I was caught off guard by him at first, but when I adapted to the frequency of his attacks, his attack method was very single and even a bit cumbersome. Matt said after recalling it. Well, this guy is really stupid. Su Ming smiled helplessly. Su Ming still had some understanding of the rhinoceros. This guy was a monster with high attack power, thick blood, and low IQ. His strength could compete with the normal Hulk for 3 days, so it was considered a bug. With his current strength, if he really encounters a rhinoceros, it will probably be a 50-50 split. The super serum provides strength, the adamantium skeleton provides defense, and the self-healing factor provides battery life. If you calculate it this way, it seems that your chances of winning are even higher. Su Ming silently compared the strength gap between him and the Rhino Man in his mind. Okay, I already know the general situation. Now, let me help you make some simple bandages to ensure that you can spend the night safely. As Su Ming spoke, he skillfully took out a medical first aid kit from under the bar and began to treat Matt's wounds. Su Ming's technique was both quick and careful, and every move revealed his meticulous care for Matt. As the gauze was wrapped around Matt's wound, the pain seemed to be relieved by this friendship. After the bandaging was completed, Su Ming gently helped Matt up, and the two of them walked to the second floor of the tavern. Although the space on the second floor is not spacious, it is well arranged, and the four rooms each have different functions. Su Ming's room is simple and warm, and the storage room is filled with various necessities. The other two staff rooms, although currently empty, remain neat and expectant, as if waiting for their future owners. You can rest here peacefully tonight. Su Ming settled Matt down, his tone full of concern and comfort. I will stay downstairs. If you need anything, call me anytime. Thank you, my friend. Matt thanked Su Ming from the bottom of his heart for his help. Su Ming patted Matt's shoulder gently, with a warm and sincere smile. Between friends, there is no need to say more. You can rest peacefully, I will take care of everything. After saying that, he gently closed the door, turned around and went downstairs, already having another plan in mind. On the first floor, under the soft light, Emma was sitting on the sofa. Her figure looked even more graceful in the dim light, like a mysterious goddess waiting to reveal the answer to the mystery. Seeing Su Ming coming downstairs, she immediately stood up, her eyes flashing with curiosity and expectation. Su Ming slowly walked to sit across from Emma, with a relaxed and confident smile on his face. I think it's time for us to talk about tonight's loss. When Emma heard this, she was slightly startled, and then a playful smile appeared on her lips. She gently fiddled with the hair beside her ears, with both challenge and curiosity in her eyes. Oh. The problem of loss. Mr. Su Ming, what kind of loss are you referring to? Is it material, or something else? Su Ming smiled slightly, and there was some deep meaning in that smile. Of course it includes but is not limited to material losses. Tonight's commotion not only affects the normal business of the pub, but also has a slight impact on my personal life. Am I right, Ms. Emma? Su Ming silently lit a cigarette for himself, waiting for Emma's response. Facing Su Ming's request for compensation for material losses, Emma couldn't help but feel a hint of bitterness and helplessness in her heart. Although she has a wealthy father, that blood relationship is like a cold stranger to her. Her mutant identity is like an insurmountable gap, isolating her from the warmth and protection of her family. At this moment, she only had the meager $100 in her pocket, which was not only all her savings, but also a faint proof of her independent survival in this world. However, this was a drop in the bucket compared to the damage the tavern had suffered, and it was difficult to fill the huge amounts of shortfall. What makes Emma feel even more helpless is that she has completely broken with her hotel manager and lost the job that once provided her with shelter and income. Now, she seems to have been abandoned by the whole world and has become a real, jobless vagrant. I'm sorry, Mr. Su Ming, I only have this little savings now. Emma silently took out $100 from her pocket and put it on the table with an embarrassed look. Su Ming raised his eyebrows and said with an ugly expression, Miss Emma, you are making things a little difficult for me. When Emma heard this, she lowered her head in shame, not daring to look directly into the other person's eyes. Ms. Emma, maybe we can change our thinking to solve the problem at hand. I have a proposal, I hope you can seriously consider it. Su Ming's tone was calm and sincere. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes full of sincerity and expectation. My pub is facing a shortage of staff, especially in service positions. Considering your ability and your previous work experience, I sincerely invite you to serve as a waiter in my tavern. To show my sincerity, I am willing to provide you with a monthly base salary of $6,000 and ensure that you have no worries about food and accommodation. Of course, for the rights and long-term development of both parties, we will sign a 3-year work contract. What do you think? Su Ming skillfully took out a work contract and gently placed it in front of Emma. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she took the contract. Her eyes quickly scanned every clause, and her eyes gradually glowed with shock and disbelief. Compared with her treatment in the hotel, a meager salary of only $3,000 per month, and an additional rent burden of $600. The actual income she received was very little. The conditions provided by Su Ming were completely different. Here, she can not only enjoy comprehensive accommodation arrangements and solve the most basic living problems, but also have a basic salary of up to $6,000, and a month-end bonus as an additional incentive. For Emma, this contract is undoubtedly a timely help and the job opportunity she dreams of. Without any hesitation, her gratitude was beyond words. She quickly and firmly signed her name on the contract and pressed her thumbprint, as if she was leaving an indelible mark on her new life. Seeing Emma signing the contract without hesitation, a meaningful smile quietly appeared on Su Ming's face. There seemed to be some kind of pride in the conspiracy was successful, in that smile. The opponent was an Omega-level mutant with the ability to change the world, and he only spent $6,000 to capture the opponent. Not to mention that the other party is a romantic stunner with beautiful appearance and hot body, and can be trained in various ways in the future. Su Ming was extremely excited right now. In this way, a simple contract inadvertently satisfied the deepest desires and expectations of two people. After Emma completed signing the contract, she returned to the hotel and started packing her bags. Su Ming sat alone on the sofa under the soft light of the pub, lost in thought. With the super serum flowing in his body, the strong adamantium skeleton, and the amazing self-healing ability, he confidently believes that in most situations, it is not difficult to protect himself, unless he encounters extremely powerful villains. In addition to the villains, there are also some decent people who are also important. The first one is the Supreme Mage Ancient One, the protector of the earth. But the strange thing is that he has traveled through time for a year and has not received an invitation from Ancient One. According to the novels he had read, Ancient One should have invited him to tea by this time, and given him some greeting gifts. It was really strange. The other one is Snake Shield, but he has not revealed too much strength now, so Luoden naturally doesn't pay much attention to him. This is normal, it depends on how it will develop in the later stage. Currently, the threat he is most concerned about mainly comes from the Russian gang, a criminal organization with huge power and ruthless methods. What's even more troublesome is that behind this gang is Kingpin, a philanthropist and entrepreneur on the surface, but actually behind the scenes is a ruthless gangster whose influence can be found in almost all the dark corners of the city. No gang member dared to mention his name, but everyone who mentioned his name had already gone to drink tea with the Lord of Hell. Thinking of this, Su Ming couldn't help but smile bitterly. He originally just wanted to live an ordinary and comfortable life, running his own tavern, watching the beauties coming and going every day, tasting fine wine, occasionally smoking a cigarette or two, and enjoying his own tranquility and freedom. But the reality is like a never-ending battle, forcing him to throw himself into danger again and again. Now that we have realized the crisis, we must improve our strength. As a result, Su Ming signed in today without hesitation. Byte. Sign in successfully. Congratulations to the host for receiving the legendary reward. Phoenix Power Fragment 1. A red treasure box appeared in front of Su Ming, shining with the unique red light of legendary rewards. Etc. Legendary rewards. Su Ming was dumbfounded. He just sighed and the system turned out to be so powerful. Su Ming immediately opened the treasure chest without saying anything. A small phoenix shining with golden light appeared in front of Su Ming. In response, he grabbed it and refined it instantly. For a moment, Su Ming seemed to be in the depths of the universe, surrounded by endless stars and void. An ancient and powerful force, the power of the phoenix, surged into his body like an awakened ancient god. This is not only the injection of energy, but also the interweaving of fate and the baptism of the soul. The huge energy of the phoenix force flowed freely in Su Ming's body, like hot lava or a rushing river, with the dual attributes of destruction and rebirth. This force was so powerful that every inch of Su Ming's skin and every bone was undergoing unprecedented pressure and transformation, and the adamantium metal skeleton also quietly changed. His eyes were shining with dazzling light, which was the reflection of the fire of the phoenix. It was both hot and deep, as if he could see into the essence of everything in the world. As the power of the phoenix continued to be integrated, Su Ming's body began to undergo amazing changes. His muscles became tighter and stronger, and golden lines were faintly revealed under his skin. They were the marks of the Phoenix Force, proving his close connection with this force. His aura also became more powerful, like a volcano about to erupt, containing the power to destroy the world. Just when Su Ming was about to completely absorb the Phoenix power, a consciousness of destruction entered his mind. This was the consciousness of the Phoenix power, which wanted to affect Su Ming's own consciousness and turn him into the incarnation of destruction. At this critical moment, a giant palm shining with colorful light appeared in Su Ming's consciousness. At the critical moment, Tongzi took action. With a gentle squeeze from the giant palm, the Phoenix power's consciousness instantly dissipated and returned, turning into countless nutrients to nourish Su Ming's own consciousness. Gradually, under the influence of the Phoenix power, Su Ming's mind and will were also experiencing unprecedented sublimation. The Phoenix power not only gave him powerful power, but also allowed him to understand the true meaning of life and the mysteries of the universe. He learned how to harness this power and find the balance between destruction and rebirth. Finally, when the energy of the Phoenix Force was completely integrated into Su Ming's body, he seemed to be reborn and became a brand new existence. Bah! A ray of golden light flashed from Su Ming's eyes. Su Ming clenched his fist and felt his own strength. He could feel that he was completely transformed now. A moment ago, he might have been worried about his own survival and safety. At this moment, it was the villain's turn to worry about how to avoid hitting his fist. The Phoenix Force is one of the three ancient powers in the Marvel Universe, and it is quite awesome. The Phoenix Force is almost as old as the birth of the universe. It is also the incarnation of the power of life and soul in the original universe and a symbol of the power of life and emotion. In terms of positioning, the Phoenix Force is essentially a way of displaying the rules of the Marvel Universe. Although there is no God setting, with this positioning, the Phoenix Force basically has a transcendent positioning like a god. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that the legendary rewards would be so overbearing. I thought the self-healing factor of the epic reward was already awesome, and it also had to be the power of the Phoenix. Su Ming looked at his palm and muttered to himself. Mainly because the emergence of the Phoenix Force completely changed his own positioning. Before he had the Phoenix power, he might have been a slightly stronger ant in this universe, but when he had the Phoenix power, he was a fierce tiger. At least he already has the right to travel in the universe. System, open my panel and take a look. Byte. Received, Master. Following Su Ming's order, a panel containing all his current information appeared in front of him. Host. Su Ming. Race. Human can evolve. Ability. Phoenix Power 1/10 Self-Healing Factor Super Serum, no side effects, Adamantium Metal Skeleton, mutated due to the influence of Phoenix Power. Strength. Heavenly Father level. Items. Beer mug with unlimited refills, magical little blue pill, Tasaka Rins, black stockings, USD modifier, etc. After taking a look at his own panel, Su Ming nodded with satisfaction. Then he looked at the dilapidated tavern, and with a wave of one hand, the objects in the house automatically decomposed and then reshaped, and all the destroyed things were restored to their original state. This Phoenix power is really useful. Looking at the brand new tavern, Su Ming said with satisfaction. At the same time, thousands of kilometers away in the Himalayas, a bald old man in pink and purple glanced in the direction of New York with some surprise. Phoenix Force. Oh, this world is really interesting. The bald old man who was meditating shook his head and then entered the meditative state again. Tonight was an extremely long night. Vladimir, looking embarrassed, led his men like bereaved dogs, staggering away back to their precarious gang lair. His heart was full of unwillingness, and he wanted to gather more strength and vowed to regain the face he had just lost. He wanted to make the tavern owner look good. He would use pliers to pull out the other person's nails one by one, and then cut off the other person's second brother, so that the tavern owner knew that their Russian gang was not easy to mess with. As for the other party being a super ability person. Come on, it's not like they don't have one, he has a murderous rhinoceros under his command. As long as Alexei Seisvich takes action, he does not believe that he will not be able to defeat the opponent. Vladimir had already begun to imagine in his mind the scene of Su Ming kneeling on the ground begging for mercy. However, the moment he stepped into the house, the scene in front of him was like a bolt from the blue, shattering all his plans. Home is no longer a safe haven, but has become a devastated battlefield. The gang members either had broken arms or wrists, or were holding their heads and groaning. They were all in a state of disarray. It was obvious that they had just experienced a tragic battle. In this chaos, only Alexei Seisvich was sitting on a rickety broken chair as if nothing was wrong, holding a wine glass in his hand and humming a tune. Can anyone tell me what the romance is going on? Vladimir's roar echoed in the empty hall, full of anger and confusion, as if to tear the oppressive air. The gang members looked at each other with embarrassment and frustration, and no one dared to speak first. More than 30 gang members seemed so powerless at this moment. They knew in their hearts that instead of succeeding, this plan had become an unspeakable shame. 30 against 1, they were unable to subdue the opponent alone. If this is revealed, the Russian gangsters will no longer need to hang out in New York, they can just go back to their hometown. After a while, seeing no one responding, the atmosphere became increasingly solemn. Vladimir slowly walked to the side of the rhinoceros Alexei. Alexei, Vladimir's voice was low and powerful, revealing unquestionable majesty. Tell me, what exactly happened tonight? Why are all of our people injured and looking embarrassed? He paused, looked directly at Alexei with burning eyes, and continued to ask, and the vigilante who has repeatedly blocked our plans? Where are the others? Quickly bring him out to see me. Vladimir sat down next to Alexei. Although his posture seemed relaxed, his words revealed urgency and determination that should not be underestimated. When the word, vigilante, came out of Vladimir's mouth, everyone's hearts seemed to be suddenly lifted up by invisible hands and hung in the air. Tension and uneasiness quickly spread in everyone's heart. Alexei, who was immersed in the aroma of wine, put down the wine glass in his hand stiffly, with a trace of complicated emotions flashing in his eyes. He lowered his head and was silent for a moment, seeming to collect his thoughts and muster up courage, and finally spoke slowly. Sorry, Vladimir, our operation failed. The troublesome vigilante escaped from our encirclement and escaped. Everything that happened tonight, including the injuries sustained by the brothers, was all his fault. Alexei's voice was low and heavy, and every word seemed like a weight squeezed out from the bottom of his heart. When Vladimir heard this, his whole body seemed to be struck by lightning, and he stood frozen on the spot. His eyes turned from calm to disbelief, and then gradually condensed into a storm that was about to explode. Although he tried hard to maintain his composure on the surface, his clenched hands and slightly trembling mouth revealed the anger and shock deep in his heart. You mean, 30 elites plus you, a superpower, can't even retain a vigilante? Vladimir's voice was low and depressed, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth, revealing that he was on the verge of losing control. The atmosphere in the entire room instantly dropped to freezing point, and everyone could feel the depression and fear, as if the calm before the storm foreshadowed the coming storm. As you can see, Vladimir, tonight's operation did fail. Alexei expressed a sincere apology, with a hint of self-blame in his voice. But don't worry, even though I failed to catch the vigilante, I at least gave him a serious injury. I believe that in the coming days, he will have to temporarily put down his identity as a vigilante and recharge his batteries. Alexei raised his head and smiled silly. Hee, yes, that's not bad. Vladimir forced a smile and patted Alexei's shoulder gently, as if to comfort him. In fact, the anger and disappointment in his heart were like surging undercurrents that were difficult to calm down. He stood up and tried to hide his emotional fluctuations with actions. Look, everyone, I just said it's okay. Alexei stood up and tried to comfort the surrounding members, but his smile seemed particularly inappropriate in the eyes of everyone. The boss is always so reasonable, he will understand. However, the eyes of everyone around him revealed an indescribable emotion, which was sympathy for Alexei's ignorance and a premonition of the coming storm. Sure enough, Vladimir's emotions exploded instantly, like an enraged beast, and he heard a series of filthy curses. Fark! 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 You fools, a bunch of useless trash. Every one of you should go to hell, be chopped into pieces and fed to wild dogs. A bunch of trash. Vladimir took out all the grievances he suffered tonight on the 30 gang members. Alexei was left alone standing aside and scratching his head in embarrassment, wanting to comfort him but not daring to speak easily. Although Vladimir's anger was fierce, his reason was not completely lost. He knows very well that Alexei is a trump card in his hand and an important pillar for the Russian gang to remain standing. Therefore, even in the most angry moments, he never criticized Alexei. After his emotions calmed down a little, Vladimir slowly walked to Alexei and took out a photo from his pocket. It was a photo of a midnight tavern. The lights on the photo were dim and mysterious. He handed the photo to Alexei, and his voice returned to its usual calmness and coldness. Alexei, I won't argue with you about tonight's matter. But you must complete a task and bring the owner of this tavern to me. Alexei took the photo, looked at it twice, and then a ferocious and decisive smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Don't worry, Vladimir, the owner of this tavern, I will definitely bring him to you with my own hands. His words revealed an unquestionable firmness and cruelty, as if an enraged beast was getting ready to attack, ready to tear apart all obstacles with its sharp fangs and use hot blood to pour out the anger in his heart. And unwilling. The next day, early morning. Emma was standing in front of the familiar door of the Midnight Tavern with a confused look on her face, dragging a suitcase with slight signs of age in her hand. Her memories came back like a tide. The gunshots and chaos last night, and the messy scene in the tavern were still vivid in her mind. However, the scene before her eyes was very different from her memory. The Midnight Tavern in front of me not only showed no trace of being destroyed, but was intact and as clean as new, as if time had gone back and all the damage and noise had been erased. A trace of incredible astonishment flashed across Emma's eyes, and she couldn't help but murmur in her heart. Even the most skilled decoration team would be hard-pressed to complete such an incredible restoration work overnight, right? This sudden change made her feel confused and surprised, and she even suspected that her memory was messed up. If it weren't for the fact that she was a powerful mental manipulator, she would even suspect that someone had secretly modified her memory. With a trace of curiosity, Emma pushed open the door of the pub, dragged her suitcase and walked in. Jingle. The crisp ringing of the doorbell broke the tranquility of the early morning, and also interrupted Su Ming's thoughts immersed in the world of TV. He slowly turned his head and looked at Emma, who had just stepped into the tavern, with a faint smile on his lips. Hey Emma, good morning. Have you had breakfast? Su Ming's voice was full of invitation and care. However, Emma seemed to be still immersed in the shock just now and did not respond immediately. Her eyes wandered around the tavern, her face filled with disbelief. The chaotic and devastated scene last night was gone now, replaced by a neat, orderly and spotless environment that complemented the brand new appearance of the tavern outside the door. Wait, let me take it easy first. Emma gently held her forehead, trying to sort out her chaotic thoughts. There was a hint of trembling in her voice, and it was obvious that she had not yet fully recovered from this sudden change. If I remember correctly, there should have been a fierce gun battle here last night, right? Emma's words were full of doubts, and her eyes jumped back and forth between Su Ming and the tavern, as if looking for a reasonable explanation. Yes, there was indeed a gun battle here last night. Su Ming's answer was concise and affirmative, without any evasion. When Emma heard this, she pointed to the intact facilities in the tavern that seemed to have never been disturbed even more doubtfully, her eyes filled with confusion. Su Ming smiled slightly, with a mysterious look in his eyes. This is actually an unexpected gain. Last night, after you left, I seemed to have awakened a new special ability. Quote. As Su Ming spoke, he slowly displayed his phoenix power in front of Emma. Golden light condensed on his right hand and turned into a phoenix spreading its wings, exuding terrifying and powerful energy fluctuations, making the entire tavern seem to be dyed with a faint golden glow. After one night of use, I discovered that this ability can decompose and reconstruct objects, so there is everything you see today. As he spoke, Su Ming tapped lightly, and a tall wine glass originally placed on the table instantly turned into dots of light, and then quickly reorganized into a short wine glass with a completely different shape. The whole process was smooth and natural. It seems like it's just a little joke of time. Emma's eyes widened and she looked at all this in disbelief. As a member of the mutants, she was well aware of the diversity of abilities, but the scene before her was far beyond her scope of cognition. You suddenly woke up without any discomfort. Emma walked quickly to Su Ming's side, her tone full of curiosity and wonder. She recalled the painful experience of her awakening, the feeling of being overwhelmed by countless chaotic sounds and thoughts, which still makes her feel frightened. When Su Ming heard this, he smiled slightly, clenched his fists, and felt the endless phoenix power in his body. Feeling of discomfort. It seems not. On the contrary, I feel like I'm in great shape now, as if the whole world has become clearer and more controllable. Su Ming's words made Emma even more surprised. She realized that the new ability that Su Ming awakened was not only powerful, but more importantly, it was perfectly integrated with it originally without any rejection or conflict. This state of harmony and nature is what many mutants dream of but cannot achieve. Many mutants are prone to losing control because they cannot control their own powers. Losing control can easily cause damage, and some people even turn themselves into humans and ghosts, like monsters, because they cannot control their own power. Although the mutants in X Academy seem to be just like ordinary people when they are not using their abilities. But in fact, this is already 1 in a million, and all of them are gifted. But the real situation is that when they awaken, most mutants often cause harm to themselves due to their inability to control their power. These are epsilon-level mutants. Some epsilon-level mutants will even become weaker than ordinary people, which is a bit unlucky. But often out-of-control forces will start a prairie fire like wildfire, inevitably affecting innocent people around them. And now there is an alpha-level mutant in front of Emma. No, it might even be omega-level. Hey, come to your senses, Emma. Su Ming gently waved his hand in front of Emma's eyes, interrupting her meditation. Emma came back to her senses. An apologetic smile flashed across her face. Oh, sorry, I was really distracted just now. Su Ming waved his hand magnanimously. It's okay, I can understand. After all, anyone would be shocked to see such power. A smile appeared on his lips and he continued, actually, when I first awakened to this power last night, I was a little confused for the first time. But having said that, with this power, our tavern will be much safer in the future. No more fear of guests who like to cause trouble, throw glasses of wine or cause havoc. I can always put things back to their original state, just like this. As he spoke, Su Ming casually crushed a wine glass and then resumed it. Emma looked at this scene and was stunned for a moment, then her mouth twitched slightly and she smiled helplessly. By the way, speaking of this, have you had breakfast? Su Ming changed the subject and asked with concern. Emma paused for a moment and wanted to reply that she had eaten, but her stomach made an unsatisfactory, gurgling sound. She couldn't help but blush on her face, looking slightly embarrassed. Emma wanted to say that she had eaten, but the growl of her stomach gave her away. Seeing this, Su Ming raised a gentle smile and said softly, it seems that someone still needs a little energy supply. With that said, he walked lightly into the kitchen, and after a moment, he walked out with a steaming plate covered with a white plate cover. Emma's eyes were tightly attracted to the plate, with curiosity and expectation shining in her eyes. Come and try it, this is our Chinese delicacy. As Su Ming spoke, he slowly opened the lid of the dinner plate. Instantly, an alluring aroma filled the air, and 4 large, plump, steaming buns came into view. They were neatly arranged on the plate, as if inviting to taste. What's this? Emma asked softly, her tone full of curiosity. These are called steamed buns. They are stuffed with beef. They are a regular fixture on our Chinese breakfast table. They are full of the taste of home. Su Ming explained with a smile, his eyes shining with joy and expectation of sharing delicious food. Besides, I made this by myself, I hope you like it. After hearing this, Emma couldn't wait to pick up a bun and took a bite. In an instant, hot juice burst out in her mouth. She exclaimed and quickly fanned herself with her hands to cool down, but her face was filled with a smile of happiness and satisfaction. This is simply delicious. Emma's eyes shone with surprise, and her love for the buns was beyond words. Just when Su Ming was about to speak and boast, the TV screen suddenly lit up, and an emergency news item came in. Mr. Obadiah Stane, what do you think of the kidnapping of Mr. Tony Stark for 3 months? A female reporter looked serious and asked questions into the camera. Mr. Stanley looked solemn and replied, I am deeply angry and sad about what happened to Tony. Now the Ministry of National Defense is going all out and using all resources to search for his whereabouts. I firmly believe that in the near future, we will be able to receive news about Tony's safe return. His tone revealed firmness and determination, as if he was announcing to the world that they would not give up any hope. Staring at Obadiah's heartbreaking and almost unreal performance on the TV screen, Su-ming couldn't help but smile to himself. He even wanted to award him an Oscar statuette in recognition of his superb acting skills. If he had not known the truth of this incident in advance and knew that Lao Den was the mastermind behind the kidnapping conspiracy, I am afraid that even he himself would have been deceived by this superb disguise. After thinking for a moment, Su-ming decided to go to Afghanistan to rescue Tony Stark. Even though he knew that according to previous plots, Tony could successfully escape from the control of the Free Army with his extraordinary wisdom, his actions this time had more far-reaching considerations. What he saved was not only Tony himself, but also the huge resources behind Tony, as well as his pivotal position and influence in the Avengers in the future. Ever since he traveled to this new world, he had thought about the problem of Snake and Shield. According to his independent character and not easily controlled by others, joining Snake and Shield is definitely not an option for him. However, he is very interested in the human resources contained in the Avengers. Although the strength of the Avengers in the early stage is indeed not that good, the Dull Hulk, the dual-standard American team, the Hammer God who plays with hammers, and then Barton and Natasha Romanoff, to him now, they are just two ordinary people. Only Tony Stark's wisdom and resources are currently the most valuable. But his vision did not stop there. He foresaw the future glory and transformation of Avengers. Especially the addition of Scarlet Witch Wanda Maximoff directly raised the strength of the Avengers to a higher level. It's a pity that Wanda can't fully control his Chaos Force at this time, let alone the various internal conflicts during the Civil War. Therefore, prying Wanda away is one of Su-ming's plans. If given the opportunity, he can even set up his own superhero team. After clarifying this goal, Su-ming became more determined. Bang! With a crisp sound, Su-ming gently placed a key in front of Emma. Emma, who was immersed in the steaming buns, was interrupted by this sudden move. She looked up at Su-ming, her eyes full of confusion. Emma, this is the key to your room on the second floor. Work clothes have been prepared for you in the room. After breakfast, go change into it. I need to go out. Su-ming said softly. Emma heard this and nodded, expressing her understanding, and at the same time asked casually, then how long will you be out for? Don't worry, I won't keep you waiting. A slight smile appeared on Su-ming's lips, which seemed to soothe people's hearts. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved slightly, as if being pulled by an invisible force, and instantly disappeared from the tavern without a trace, leaving only a faint afterimage and ripples in the air. Emma looked at the direction where Su-ming disappeared and was stunned for more than 3 seconds, then a relieved smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. She thought to herself, why should she make such a fuss? Isn't the boss's strength exactly what she expected? Thinking of this, Emma's mood instantly became lighter. She knows very well that only if her boss is strong can she have a stable haven in this troubled world. After seeing Su-ming's latest ability this morning, she began to plan her future. She secretly decided to follow Su-ming's footsteps closely, because he was not only super powerful and talented, but also a generous person. A generous and trustworthy leader. She had a feeling that Su-ming's appearance seemed to be able to change the status of mutants in human society in the future. Just when Su-ming's figure disappeared from the tavern, thin and heavy footsteps quietly sounded in the stairwell. Matt, covered in bandages, was staggering downstairs, each step seeming to carry a heavy burden. His hair was messy and his expression was slightly confused. He had obviously just woken up from a dream and was not yet fully awake. However, despite his poor physical condition, Matt's extremely keen sense of smell could easily detect an unusual smell. He moved his nose slightly, and the familiar scent in the air made a faint smile appear on his lips. Needless to say, this guest is the lady from last night. Afghanistan, Gobi Desert. With the sudden appearance of a human figure, a rhythm of life was brought to this desolate place. The ability Su-ming used this time was the teleportation of the Phoenix power. This ability allows him to cross thousands of mountains and rivers in an instant and reach the place he wants with just a thought. It is convenient and efficient. It is undoubtedly an excellent means to explore the unknown and respond to emergencies. But compared with Kama-Taja's portal, teleportation is slightly smaller and can only carry 2 or 3 people traveling together. But it is more flexible and changeable. It does not require complicated rituals and huge energy support. It can travel between time and space by itself. On the other hand, the power of the portal lies in its ability to transport an entire army at once, showing unparalleled war potential and strategic value. After Su Ming arrived in the Gobi Desert, he did not search blindly. He first used the power of his mind to spread it over the entire Gobi like a delicate web. Every slight fluctuation could not escape his perception. Soon, the subtle energy fluctuations coming from the north caught his attention, and he immediately started teleportation again without hesitation, heading towards the place of abnormal movement accurately. When Su Ming appeared again, he happened to witness Tony Stark driving the slightly rough but innovative Mark I armor, roaring down from the blue sky. Boom! Dust flew into the sky, and Tony cleverly landed next to Su Ming. Tony struggled to get out of the wreckage of the Mark I. Although his body was exhausted, his eyes still shone with unyielding light. He looked around, trying to clarify the illusion he had just had at that moment. When he landed, he seemed to see someone. In this desolate and boundless Gobi Desert, such an idea seemed so absurd that he couldn't help but wonder if he was hallucinating due to long-term tension and pressure. However, just as Tony's thoughts were wandering between reality and illusion, a clear and firm voice sounded in his ears, like a sweet spring in the desert, instantly bringing him back to reality. "You are not hallucinating, I am indeed right next to you." The voice was gentle and powerful, with an undoubted sense of authenticity. Tony raised his head suddenly, searching around with his eyes, and finally settled on a figure that seemed ordinary but revealed an extraordinary temperament. Countless questions arose in his mind, and he blurted out, "Who are you? Is it the guardian of this Gobi Desert, or a ghost from another world? Or is it the messenger of death god who came to end my life?" Facing Tony's series of questions, Su Ming smiled slightly. It was the talkative Tony he was familiar with. "Don't worry, I am neither a ghost nor a death god. I am a person who can help you get out of your current predicament." As Su Ming finished speaking, Tony breathed a sigh of relief and lay on the ground exhausted. "Thank you, Heavenly Father, I am finally saved." Tony did not have the slightest doubt about Su Ming's words, not because of blind trust, but based on a clear understanding of the current situation. In this desolate and crisis-ridden Gobi Desert, he, Tony Stark, an inventor who has temporarily lost advanced equipment and is in trouble, does not have significant use value to any possible rescuers. And just when Su Ming was about to take Tony away, his expression suddenly became serious. Because he saw someone who shouldn't be there at this time. That is the Mandarin. In the vast, wind-swept Gobi Desert, a mysterious man wearing a black suit was walking towards Su Ming. His steps are steady and powerful, and each step is accompanied by an indescribable rhythm, as if it is the reappearance of some ancient rhythm between heaven and earth. Around his body, there was a strange power fluctuation quietly filling the air. It was an energy that was beyond the understanding of mortals. It was neither like the energy of a superpower nor the magic power of a magician. It rhymes gently inadvertently, like the most distant star in the night sky, distant but eye-catching. "Okay, let's stop here. There is no need to get closer to us." When the other party's figure was frozen about 10 meters away, Su Ming said softly. The mysterious man stopped as he was told. He calmly adjusted his sleeves and gently rubbed the ring with his fingertips. His eyes flashed with interest in Su Ming. Then, his eyes passed over Tony Stark sitting in the ruins, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he said slowly. "I am not interested in exploring your identity, nor do I intend to know it. But at this moment, I give you two choices for consideration. 1. Leave this place wisely and hand Tony Stark to me. I may consider letting you leave this place. 2. You should probably start making plans for your afterlife and find a suitable resting place." The mysterious man leisurely clasped his hands behind his back, revealing an unquestionable arrogance in his posture, as if in his eyes, Su Ming was just a small and fragile existence that could be reduced to nothing with just a slight twist. "Tisk, tisk, tisk, listen to your arrogant and rude words, you still think you are some kind of superior god." Facing the threat of the mysterious man, Su Ming not only showed no fear, but responded in kind with a hint of joking in his tone. Hearing this, the mysterious man raised a playful smile. "Interesting, young man, you successfully aroused my interest. Let me see if your ability is as sharp as your mouth." Before he finished speaking, the mysterious man's figure suddenly moved, like an arrow from a string, and he rushed towards Su Ming with an unstoppable momentum. Facing this sudden attack, Su Ming remained calm, without any panic in his eyes. But the moment the mysterious man moved, Su Ming clearly saw 10 rings emerging from the other man's sleeves. If it is the 10th ring, then there is a high chance that this person is Xu Wenwu. But what about the 10 rings on his hand? In Shang-Chi, Xu Wenwu obviously doesn't have the 10 commandments. Could it be that they are decorations? Su Ming felt a little confused at the moment. Could it be that his arrival created a butterfly effect? Just as Su Ming stood there thinking, Tony was already anxious. Although he knew nothing about the mysterious man's identity, he was keenly aware of the other's malice and danger from his words, and knew that once he fell into his hands, he would be in trouble. Hey, friend, aren't you going to avoid it? Tony Stark shouted anxiously to Su Ming, he's about to hit us. His voice was full of urgency and worry, and he had already foreseen the scene of Su Ming being knocked to the ground. Boom. Before Tony could finish speaking, a fierce conflict broke out between the mysterious man and Su Ming. A powerful wave of energy suddenly erupted, and Tony was violently thrown away, tumbling in the air like a kite with a broken string. When he finally regained his balance, what he saw in front of him was a scene that stunned him. The mysterious man's arms are wrapped with 10 strange and ancient rings, 5 on each hand, shining with a deep light, like magic weapons described in ancient Eastern myths, exuding a heart-stopping aura. And the friend he just met, a young yellow man, his coat has become tattered, obviously the traces left by the shock wave just now. But even so, Su Ming's face still maintained that indifference and calmness. He gently pulled off the coat that could no longer cover his body, his eyes sparkling with curiosity and inquiry. I'm very curious. Su Ming's voice was calm and powerful. Are you Xu Wenwu or the legendary Mandarin? Facing Su Ming's question, the mysterious man was slightly stunned at first, and then a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, as if he was surprised by Su Ming's knowledge. It's really interesting. Not only do you know the name of the Mandarin, you also know something about my true identity. He said slowly, with a hint of emotion in his tone, in this era, my name has long been forgotten by most people and buried in the dust of history. The mysterious man sighed softly, and his deep eyes seemed to have traveled through the long river of time and space, showing a kind of indifference that had gone through vicissitudes and seen through the harshness of the world. After hearing the other party's confirmation, Su Ming had already made up his mind. The mysterious man in front of him was Xu Wenwu from Shang-Chi. Although the 10 rings on the opponent's hand still made him doubtful, this was no longer a major obstacle. At this moment, his first priority is to solve the immediate crisis and take Tony away safely. Boy, tell me your name. Since you know my identity, I can spare your life. Xu Wenwu wrapped his hands around the 10 rings and said proudly. In his opinion, Su Ming was considered a good warrior if he could withstand the full blow of his 10th ring. From the time he obtained the 10th ring to now, no ordinary person has been able to withstand his full blow, which proves that Su Ming is by no means an ordinary person. His desire for power and talent made him want to take Su Ming under his wing and help him realize his unreachable ambitions and dreams. Excuse me, Su Ming. Su Ming cupped his hands and said. Su Ming. Xu Wenwu silently repeated the other party's name in his heart, but he had never heard of this person in his mind. Su Ming, are you interested in joining my 10 Rings gang? Xu Wenwu suddenly asked. His question almost made Su Ming think that he had heard wrongly. Etc. Are you inviting me to join your 10 Rings gang? Su Ming scratched his head and asked with some disbelief. Yes, young people with abilities like you should join us. Xu Wenwu put one hand behind his back, looking like a big brother taking the lead. Please let me slow down. I feel like something's not quite right. Su Ming covered his forehead, his heart was broken at this moment. He was inexplicably invited by the Mandarin. The key issue is that the 10 Rings gang is a villain organization, a mysterious organization dedicated to destroying world peace at all costs. Can you tell me first, what is the goal of your organization? Su Ming asked curiously. Target. Our goal is to maintain world peace and eradicate all darkness in the world. Regarding Su Ming's question, Xu Wenwu answered his question instantly without thinking. Forehead. Maintain world peace. Xu Wenwu's answer completely shocked Su Ming. Is this still the Mandarin he knew who wanted to destroy human society? Then why did you kidnap Mr. Tony Stark? Su Ming pointed at Tony, who was not far away, and asked curiously. Regarding this question, Xu Wenwu smiled slightly and said, "You have to understand that there are all kinds of huge expenses that are indispensable for the operation of an organization. I kidnapped Mr. Tony Stark mainly to achieve some kind of cooperation with him." Xu Wenwu said with a smile. Well, at best it sounds like cooperation, but at worst it sounds like robbery. After hearing the other party's answer, Su Ming complained silently in his heart. Well, thank you for the invitation, Mr. Xu. Unfortunately, I'm used to being alone, so I won't join your gang for now. Su Ming rejected Xu Wenwu's invitation. Xu Wenwu was not surprised at all by Su Ming's answer. It seemed that he knew the other party's choice. In this case, the little brother may not be able to leave this place easily. After Xu Wenwu said that, he raised his arms, and the 10 rings exploded with unparalleled power. In response, Su Ming smiled slightly, stretched and said lightly. Just in time, I also want to see the power of the legendary 10 rings. Boom. Before Su Ming finished speaking, a shocking wave of energy centered on him, surging like a frenzy, and violently spread to all directions. The dazzling phoenix power surged endlessly on Su Ming's body, like flowing golden flames, dazzling and dazzling. Under the baptism of this power, a huge golden red phoenix slowly condensed behind him, its wings spread, majestic and sacred, as if it had traveled from ancient mythology, carrying the dual meaning of destruction and rebirth. Facing Su Ming's sudden burst of powerful energy, Xu Wenwu's eyes narrowed involuntarily. He could clearly perceive the threat from Su Ming, which was an existence beyond the conventional super ability category and contained some ancient and mysterious power. Especially the lifelike phoenix shadow behind Su Ming made Xu Wenwu feel a subtle feeling in his heart. The familiar outline seemed to coincide with the picture he had read in a dusty ancient book. The legendary phoenix power was said to have been mastered by a peerless genius in Kunlun, and became an eternal legend with the disappearance of that genius. However, the scene in front of him made Xu Wenwu suspicious. Why was that powerful energy that was once thought to have disappeared from the world, so clearly displayed in front of him at this moment? How did this power reappear in the world? A series of questions were swirling in his mind, but he also understood that this was definitely not the time to think about these. Su Ming was seen wearing the power of the splendid golden phoenix, leaping lightly, and his whole body turned into a dazzling fiery red meteor, roaring towards Xu Wenwu with blazing flames and unparalleled power. Its speed is so fast that it seems to have crossed the boundaries of time and space. Facing Su Ming's thunderous and terrifying attack, Xu Wenwu showed the calmness and composure he had possessed in the past century. He knows very well that it is never wise to blindly confront someone without fully understanding the other party's details. Therefore, he did not rush to meet the attack head-on, but moved slightly, like catkins in the wind, adjusting his position lightly. Xu Wenwu took a deep breath, and then assumed a simple and solemn posture. This is Tai Chi, one of the treasures of Chinese martial arts. 10 rings rotate around each other, forming an airtight defensive circle. He prepared to use the essence of Tai Chi, 4 or 2 moves to move 1,000 catties, to deal with Su Ming's offensive, intending to use skillful energy to neutralize the opponent's strength and find an opportunity to counterattack. Tai Chi emphasizes using softness to overcome hardness and using stillness to stop. Every movement of Xu Wenwu seems so calm and unhurried, but there are hidden mysteries. He seemed to be integrated with the world around him. Every breath and every movement echoed the airflow between heaven and earth, forming an indescribable harmony and balance. Facing Su Ming's meteor-like offensive, Xu Wenwu's Tai Chi stance was like an invisible net, quietly waiting for the prey to arrive. Boom! In an instant, the confrontation between Su Ming and Xu Wenwu started like lightning, but Xu Wenwu did not choose to confront Su Ming head-on. He was like a martial arts master who had experienced hundreds of battles. Every fierce attack from Su Ming was defied by his exquisite martial arts skills. It was as if the 10 rings were no longer just weapons in his hands, but had become a part of his body, extremely flexible and full of vitality. Su Ming frowned slightly when he saw this. He knew that he was not only facing a powerful opponent, but also a seasoned warrior with hundreds of years of combat experience. Xu Wenwu's proficiency in Chinese martial arts allowed him to easily deal with various complex combat situations and neutralize his attacks one by one. Su Ming understood in his heart that although he possessed the powerful phoenix power, it seemed that this power had not yet exerted its true power in his hands. He has great strength, but lacks matching combat skills and combat experience, which makes him somewhat powerless when facing opponents like Xu Wenwu. However, facing the temporary disadvantage, Su Ming did not show any signs of discouragement. After a fierce confrontation with Xu Wenwu, he cleverly used the reaction force of the collision to gracefully distance himself from his opponent and reassess the battle situation. The strength is indeed outstanding, but the combat experience is still immature. Xu Wenwu rubbed his hands lightly and commented with a faint smile on his lips. When Su Ming heard this, he bowed his hands humbly and responded, "Compared to Mr. Xu, I am like a child who is just getting involved in the world. I can't even compare to him." Ha 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 ha, Xu Wenwu laughed heartily, with a bit of vicissitudes and pride in his voice. "After all, I have lived for hundreds of years, and my combat experience is naturally beyond your reach. But your talent is truly amazing. Are you willing to follow me? If you and I join forces, we will be able to sweep away the evil in the world and leave those villain organizations with nowhere to hide." Faced with Xu Wenwu's tempting olive branch, Su Ming did not rush to answer. Instead, after pondering for a moment, he slowly said, "Mr. Xu, let me think about this matter again." "No problem, I'll wait for your good news." Xu Wenwu's smile was still warm and tolerant. Then, Su Ming turned his eyes to Tony Stark, who was looking astonished not far away, and asked, "So, regarding Mr. Stark, can I take him away?" Xu Wenwu smiled slightly, as if he had already understood Su Ming's thoughts, and joked, "Even if I want to stop him, I'm afraid I'm not strong enough." The words revealed a recognition of Su Ming's ability and a calm acceptance of the results. Hearing this, Su Ming clasped his fists, appeared next to Tony, and then disappeared into the Gobi Desert with Tony. The moment Su Ming turned around and left, Xu Wenwu's face suddenly turned as cold as frost. He gently touched the headphones next to his ears and said in a low voice, "You can come here." Within a moment, a helicopter roared across the sky and hovered steadily above Xu Wenwu's head. Immediately afterwards, a group of elite soldiers wearing tight-fitting black combat uniforms jumped from the helicopter like divine soldiers. They also escorted a bald foreigner in their hands, who was the leader of the Free Afghan Army. Upon seeing Xu Wenwu, the former hero immediately knelt down on the ground and burst out a series of begging for mercy in an attempt to exchange for a chance of survival. However, Xu Wenwu turned a deaf ear to his pleas, with only indifference and determination in his eyes. He thought to himself and said, "Have you ever known how much your small negligence has hindered my grand plan? Remember, if you make a mistake, you must bear the consequences." Xu Wenwu's words were like ice, every word was bone-piercing. The commander of the Free Army seemed to have foreseen his own tragic ending. A trace of determination flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly pulled out the dagger from his waist and stabbed Xu Wenwu hard in the neck. However, the moment the dagger was about to touch Xu Wenwu's skin, everything seemed to freeze. The bald man was surprised to find that he could not move any further, as if he was tightly bound by an invisible force. I saw a ring worn on the middle finger of Xu Wenwu's right hand suddenly flashing a strange light, as if the time around him was quietly slowing down. All the movements of the bald gringo became extremely slow, as if they were stuck in the quagmire of time. Xu Wenwu stared coldly at the bald man in front of him, his voice low and cold. "I plan to give you a chance to change your ways, but since you insist on choosing a dead end, don't blame me for being ruthless." Before he finished speaking, the other ring on his left index finger suddenly lit up with a dazzling red light, and a suffocating high temperature surged out of it. Like the fire of hell, it instantly devoured the bald foreign man. In the horrified eyes of everyone, it turned into ashes all over the sky and drifted away in the wind, leaving only a dead silence. Send personnel immediately to conduct a thorough investigation of this person named Su Ming. I want to have all the information about him. After Xu Wenwu boarded the helicopter, he gave the order in a cold tone. Yes. A soldier responded quickly with a solemn expression. The power of the Phoenix actually came to the world again. Xu Wenwu was sitting in the helicopter, looking through the clouds and staring into the distance, thinking to himself, Su Ming, who are you, and what secrets are you hiding? His voice was low and full of mystery, as if he was talking to himself, and he seemed to be seeking answers from unknown forces. New York, Hell's Kitchen, Midnight Tavern. In the slightly deserted tavern, Matt and Emma sat opposite each other. Emma's eyes couldn't help but fall on Matt's patchwork bandages, and the corners of her mouth could not resist the smile and raised slightly. However, when her thoughts flowed and she recalled that although the other party could not see, he had accomplished feats that were unattainable for ordinary people at night, the smile in Emma's heart was quickly replaced by a sincere respect. You laughed, right? Matt held his crutch tightly and asked softly in his magnetic voice. Can you see me? But your eyes are obviously damaged, right? Emma asked curiously, her eyes full of doubts. Yes, when I was young, a sudden chemical accident took away my sight. Since then, my world has become an endless sea of fire, like the abyss of hell. However, things are unpredictable. Although my eyes can no longer see the light, my other senses have been enhanced as never before. Matt said with a smile. Sounds not bad. Emma raised an eyebrow. Just as the two continued to prepare to talk, a burst of space fluctuations suddenly came from the tavern. Immediately afterwards, a dazzling golden light shone in the room for an instant, like a shooting star piercing the night sky, and then quietly disappeared. When the light dissipated, there were two more people in the tavern. It was Su Ming and Tony. The two of them seemed to have returned from fleeing the distant Gobi Desert of Afghanistan, both looking dusty. Su Ming held Tony's shoulders tightly, his eyes were deep and calm, and he glanced at the bewildered Emma and the slightly surprised Matt. Tony looked extremely tired, as if his strength had been drained from his whole body, and he almost collapsed to the ground. His face was pale and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. Obviously, this journey across time and space was an unprecedented physical and spiritual test for him. Oh my God, let me just take a breath, that feeling. I don't want to experience it again. Quote. As Tony spoke, he slowly sat down on a quaint sofa, his body trembling unconsciously due to lingering fear. The expression on his face was complicated, including relief and deep fear of what he had just experienced. Wait, you just left for just 10 minutes just to bring back a homeless man. And what happened to your clothes? There was a bit of ridicule in Emma's words, but then she carefully handed Tony a glass of warm boiled water. Tramp. You mean this person? Su Ming raised the corners of his mouth slightly, with a hint of laughter in his eyes. He gently pointed at Tony, who was slumped on the sofa. That's right, isn't it? Emma's face was full of confusion. She looked at Su Ming doubtfully, as if expecting a reasonable explanation. At this moment, the image of Tony Stark and the word, tramp, were so appropriate. His once glamorous designer shirt has become wrinkled, and the fatigue and dust of the journey still remain on his face. No one can connect this slovenly man with the status of the world's richest man. Oh my gosh, it's a big joke that the richest man in the world is mistaken for a homeless man. Su Ming finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Emma's face was filled with disbelief, her eyes widened in surprise, and her eyes were fixed on Tony on the sofa. Unless Su Ming revealed the other party's identity personally, she would never connect this seemingly down-and-out man with the world-famous Mr. Tony Stark. However, an even more shocking thought suddenly came to her mind. She recalled the news this morning. It was clearly reported that Tony Stark was attacked by unknown forces in Afghanistan and had been mysteriously missing for 3 months. The entire international community was shocked by this. But at this moment, he suddenly appeared in this small tavern, and he brought him back after Su Ming went out. This couldn't help but cause ripples in Emma's heart, and she began to worry about whether there was a more complicated truth hidden behind this seemingly accidental event. Could it be that Su Ming's outing is inextricably linked to the disappearance of Tony Stark? He may even have been directly involved in rescuing the long-missing world's richest man from an unknown predicament. Thinking of this, Emma couldn't help but a trace of cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She began to realize that she might be involved in an event that was far more complicated than she imagined. Bang! Seeing Emma's confused look, Su Ming flicked her forehead gently. What are you thinking about? Su Ming asked teasingly. No, it's nothing. I'm just, well, in a daze. Emma rubbed her forehead that was hurt by Su Ming's bullet. A smile appeared at the corner of Su Ming's lips. He stopped delving into it and said seriously. Okay, now, it's time to have a good chat with our Mr. Stark. With that said, he walked straight to the sofa and sat down elegantly opposite Tony Stark. Tony Stark's mental state has obviously recovered after a short rest during this period. He slowly looked around, his eyes passing through every corner of the tavern, and finally landed on the person in front of him. A trace of relief and gratitude flashed in his eyes. He understood that he had escaped from that dangerous experience and came to a safe place. Thank you for your help. Tony's voice was slightly hoarse, but he had returned to his usual firmness. I owe you a favor. Tony Stark knew very well that the person in front of him could not be impressed by money. After witnessing the thrilling showdown between Su Ming and Xu Wenwu, he became even more convinced that he and the other party lived in completely different dimensions. Especially the strange energy fluctuations emanating from Su Ming's body, as well as the power of time and space travel he displayed. It completely subverts Tony's cognition, just like Superman from the comics, which is shocking. There was also the mysterious figure called the Mandarin, which Tony felt even more incredible. According to what the other party said, this person has survived for hundreds of years. This is undoubtedly a heavy blow to Tony's worldview. How can a human on Earth survive across the torrent of time to this day? This was simply unbelievable, as absurd as a fantasy, but yet so real in front of him, challenging all his common sense and cognition. In today's era, many elderly wealthy people are willing to spend everything they have in order to stay in this world for a few extra years. But when a person who had actually lived for hundreds of years suddenly appeared in front of him, he couldn't help but feel an indescribable feeling of envy in his heart. It is a desire for the length of life and a yearning for unknown territory. He knows very well that with the current level of technology, it is simply impossible to achieve such an extension of life. Neither medical breakthroughs nor biotechnology innovations have yet touched such a miracle. Apart from those unreachable mutation possibilities and the mysterious magical powers in ancient legends, he really couldn't think of any other way to extend a person's lifespan so amazingly. Looking at Tony Stark's face, which was lost in thought for him, Su Ming smiled softly, took out a mobile phone from his pocket, and handed it to him. I think you should probably call Miss Pepper now to let her know that you are safe and sound. Su Ming said softly. Tony came out of his trance, took the mobile phone on the table, and pressed a series of numbers with his fingers skillfully. After a while, the girl's surprised and slightly screaming voice came from the other end of the phone, obviously very excited about the news that Tony was safe and sound. Then came Tony's comfort to Pepper, and finally Tony made one of his requests. That is to ask Pepper to bring some cheeseburgers when he comes. He really wants a cheeseburger now. Thanks for watching.